certainly Alcoa couldn't go about rehabilitation if that mine was continued to be used. That's about as much as we can say on that.
And there was another question here, the lady in the blue.
My name is Bev Norton. I have lived in this beautiful seaside town for 53 years. If I had children, I would not send them to the Anglesea State School. And are people aware that in Yarloop, which is the mining town with Alcoa, there was a successful class action brought by lawyers from Perth against Alcoa?
I wasn't aware of that. No.
I don't know if the mine closed, but I do know that they brought Erin Brockovich, who people would know out from America.
Wow.
And if that can be checked out, I'd be happy to find out about it.
So Mark, can we get Erin over? Does that help? That would be something. There was another hand up in the front here. Sarah Henderson, the member for Corangamite, has got to go at 3:30, but she did want to say a couple of things before she goes.
Jeff, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Look, I'm very much a believer in practical environmentalism. I wrote a column for the Geelong Advertiser in January questioning the public policy of continuing the mine in light of the closure of Point Henry. That hasn't been welcomed by everyone on my side of politics, but I've always promised to be a strong local voice for my community, and that's what I'm being. I just want you to consider a couple of issues. The first one is that Alcoa will look at this mine and the future of the mine from the point of view of commercial viability. So you've got to ask, what are we going to do as a community? And that's what I've raised. Sulphur dioxide scrubbers will cost Alcoa about $160 million. In my view, they're essential. If this mine was in America, it could not function. It would be prohibited. So in urging Alcoa or the third party that may buy this mine to invest in sulphur dioxide scrubbing technology, it may mean that the mine is no longer commercially viable. So that's a really important issue, and one that I think that this community needs to focus on and campaign on very strongly. The other issue is we are reviewing, it's a COAG process, a state and federal process, air emission standards in Australia. And I'm very supportive of expediting that review, as is the Environment Minister Greg Hunt, and Greg and I have met with Jacinta and spoken about this very issue. So urging the government, state and federal, to expedite the review of air emission standards. If you bring the air emission standards, if you tighten them, it may also mean that a much tighter standard applies to the mine. Again, raising questions about its commercial viability. For me, I think it's responsible that I raise these issues. I'm very cautious of the 85 jobs here. I don't want to see any jobs lost, but I think these are really important things that the community should consider, and to a large degree, I'm very supportive of what you're doing and your mission here today. Thank you.
There's a question down the front here as well that Mark spotted.
It's just a very simple question.
Yep.
Will those papers go up on your website? There's some interesting information that would be really good to read in post-situation.
So from these presentations? From
these presentations.
Yes,
yeah.
that will happen. Yep, fantastic. Any other questions? At the back there, you were first, back right, and then the gentleman here. Yep. We've got time for a few more before we get to next steps. As the microphone's walking down, where to from here? That's what we want to close today on.
Well, thanks to our social media, we're not all that popular in Anglesea, really. About Morwell, given his history of finding in favour of business and the government, what makes anyone think that Bernard Teague's a fit and proper person to conduct that investigation anyway?
We'll take that as a comment, I think. Thank you. Cheers. And the gentleman here was next. Yep.
Thank you. I'm Dennis Clark. I'm permanent resident of Anglesea since 2002, but I was down here in 1953 surfing. What my question is to do with wind farms, and which it seems to me no government thinks that they cause a great deal of illness and hence they prevent people putting wind farms in. Just what exactly are these effects on people's health that wind farms generate?
Thanks for the question. Lee, is that something you can have a shot at?
Excellent question. Well, I'm happy to let you know that there are now 20 reviews by credible health bodies that have shown that wind energy is clean and safe. So just a few weeks ago, the peak body for Australia, the National Health and Medical Research Council, they released their draft report. No dramas, it's okay. The Victorian Department of Health last year released their own study on it. No dramas. But what we are seeing is a concerted effort to really muddy up the waters about this clean energy technology. There's a group called the Warburg Foundation. They were founded and they get a lot of their funding from a fossil fuel businessman, Peter Mitchell. So, yeah, I mean, this is what I spend my day doing, is countering the misinformation from these people. So, no dramas, it's clean and safe.
One more down here, was it? Yep, here, sorry.
Hello, my name is Robbie. The question is directed towards you, Lee. You mentioned that one wind propeller would service 2,000 homes. So you're saying Anglesea probably needs at least one? Okay. Now, what's the capital cost and what's the operating cost of one of those units?
Okay, so the Hepburn Wind Farm, and this was a few years ago at the peak of the global financial crisis. That community, the 2,000 investors pulled enough money, they got a loan. It was, I believe, $10 million for the 2 turbines, and that will take 11 years to pay off, and then you've got 19 years of electricity generation and profit flowing into the community. Technology is improving rapidly, the costs are coming down with the economies of scale, so I think the economics will be much better today than they were back when Hepburn Wind pioneered it. Yeah, and so 1 turbine for the Anglesea residents, and if you wanted to cope with the peak demand, it would probably be around 5 turbines, and that would give you a huge revenue stream, that you'd be exporting to the grid and getting a lot of revenue.
We've got time for 2 more questions.
Doug Cooper, the Anglesea River seems to be closed or unsuitable for fishing quite often over the last 2 years. What's the contribution of the coal mine to the release or the increased acidity in that river?
You can answer that. Okay. This gentleman down here claims he can answer it, so I'm going to invite him up. I'm going to accept that offer and let him have a stab at it. Your name, sir?
Sorry, my name's Doug Roth. I actually works with the Catchment Management Authority, but I don't work there anymore, so this is not official. But part of my work was actually working with volunteers sampling the Anglesea River. And it's actually the opposite. Alcoa's water that comes out of the power station is groundwater that's been treated, it's been buffered, and it comes out neutral. It's the upstream water that's acid from the soils and the catchment. So the 2 or so million litres a day that come out of Alcoa are actually supporting the river. It's a major component of the flow, and it actually helps reduce the acidity. So if the question.
So again, perspectives in the room, and it's the other thing Shay was pointing at, is that the capacity we have in the community to understand things is really high as well. So there was one more question up here, I think. Yep.
Jerry Clancy from Harvey Street. I've been coming for 50 years. My question is Sarah could answer this. Is the fire station...
Sarah Webb.
Sarah had to go at 3:30. Can we write your question down and get it to her anyway? Okay, all right. A question about viability with the carbon tax. All right, we'll take that one on notice as well. There's one more. Yep.
I'm not from this community, but I'm an A-grade electrician. Okay, and I pitied you. I couldn't have a go at Sarah Henderson because I did last time, and she nearly breathed. The thing is, there was a plan down here to do a geothermal power station, and the reason it didn't go ahead is the noise from it, and I think it was only 40 decibel, the noise on the boundary of the geothermal power station. Now I can tell you, I've just done a solar course, and the inverter outside the house puts out about 45 decibels. Okay, so I just want to know why this geothermal power station didn't go ahead. Was it a lack of government funding, or they pulled out earlier this year? So,
good question. And again, I think it speaks to the opportunities in the future and what else could be in place of what we have. So I can't answer the question, but we'll again take it on note. Mark's got a comment to make on one of the questions.
Just quickly, the question about the carbon tax. You'd be aware that when Alcoa announced the closure of Point Henry, they made it very clear in that statement that the carbon tax hadn't been an influence on the closing of the smelter, and it was more the aluminium price internationally that we couldn't compete with. In fact, Alcoa has done incredibly well out of the carbon tax. They've been receiving free permits for 94.5% of their emissions, and that's a package that's being worth $1.7 billion to them over 5 years.
Okie doke. Yes. Oh, one more. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I've been coming to Anglesea for 40 odd years. Every time I come, I start to cough. So I know about the impact on the air on my health.